A beautiful lovely gamers, my name is Jonal. I was scrolling through Twitter the other day and came over a tweet from youroverwatch, a channel that I follow on Twitter. I subscribe to them on YouTube. Like it's kind of like I on YouTube from like the Overwatch, from like the large, like, you know, Overwatch Central and on all these other channels like Stalosa. I really only follow Stalosa and like Unilost Gaming because I love Stalosa as an individual. He's so fucking just amazing to watch, enthusiastic. And I follow Overwatch because I actually think that they deliver really good content, especially from a channel that doesn't have a background in coaching or anything like that. As I understand it, from a high tier competitive standpoint, they don't coach. I don't think any of the creators are, you know, ex players from like any high tier professional team or anything like that. So especially with that background, they deliver really good content. I don't know why they're getting so much hate in the community, but they do. Anyway, I came over a very interesting tweet that made me think over the meta that we're currently playing in. So it says, interesting how many people call Sigma an off-tank. Semantic, yes, but I think it's important for those trying to learn the game. Orisa Sigma plays like two main tanks. Further, I just had a thought, Ryan-Winston combo may be surprisingly good. In double shield, well, double barrier meta, max shield penetration. I essentially said, follow up that, you know, this works really well in solo queue, just because in solo queue you rather want individual skill over meta correct picks. And he responded, yeah, I mean, no meta discussion is possible if you filter through the mess of Overwatch rank below GM. But if high levels, if the map works for it, I think double shield can't do anything for two old school main tanks pushing them, blocking everything they do and penetrating their shields. Now, I said that I wanted to Theorycraft this, and I asked if he had a special map, so I knew exactly what he was talking about, so I didn't just, like, take his word out of context and just made something. So I asked if he had anything, you know, in mind, so I could Theorycraft on it, just for fun, which is what we're going to do this video. And he said that it only works against Orisa Sigma. This was, like, his thought. It was only against Orisa Sigma, so we're going to play this against Orisa Sigma, where you can play, on maps where you can play Ryan Zarya right now. But maybe, if there's a good and like enough high ground to surround the cleave damage from Winston, it's just better than Zarya, especially after the nerf. Having a second engage barrier helps the Ryan not to be inactive when regaining his. So, for example, King's Row. And this is a very interesting way, because the way that it's set up is supposed to be theoretically really, really good. So I think that we're going to go through a theory crafting segment, and I hope this kind of helps inspiring coaches to people that play on team, or just in general, to see how theory crafting is done. So right now the theory is as follows. We will have maps where Ryan, like, of course, the map needs to be a map that Ryan works on, which is limited during the meta. So King's Row works really well. This is a map that Ryan Zarya has been playing for a long time, and it's a map where Ryan can close gaps very, very efficiently and play around corners. There's a lot of resting points for him, so it can work very well. There's also a lot of high grounds for Winston to set up dives. We've seen dive plays on this map before, but it's actually been one of the few maps that have been contested between what dive meta. This has been one of the few maps that I still remember there was people that even during dive meta tried to still play Ryan on it, because it can work for Ryan on this map. So it works as follow. You have two tanks that can press you two different angles. The Winston has the AoE, the Ryan has the hammer, so it doesn't really matter how many shields they have up, because that damage will just penetrate. Meaning you have two very heavy brawling tanks that work really good against this brawling, against the opposing team, can really cleave through, deal a lot of damage into areas, which essentially denies very quick area. You can put the Ryan and the Winston on one little spot and just say, fuck off. Like, you cannot play inside that area due to the damage amount. On top of that, which is the problem, is that Reinhardt himself, the problem against him in Bunker, which is actually very specifically said here in the tweet, is that during the resting phase, during when the Reinhardt has burned through his shield resource, he becomes very inactive. And it can be very easy for the Ryan to, if he goes low on his health or his shield, to be very quickly pushed back and kept pressure on, so he can never re-engage effectively and therefore dies. With the Winston, the idea is that you will have another main tank to kind of pick up the slack when the Ryan does that, so the Ryan can then re-engage. So you kind of have one tank that can take over for a while and let the Ryan engage. Now, the statement also said that Sigma was, that he categorized Sigma, that Sigma plays a little bit like a main tank. So Orisa Sigma plays a little bit like two main tanks. And I want to quickly just mention something about that. So we will use Symmetra as the icon for Sigma, because that banana, at least as I know, don't have an update for Sigma yet. I don't know why that has taken so long, but they don't. So there's no update. Right now, there's no update for Sigma, unfortunately. So this icon will be used as a Sigma placeholder. This is not Symmetra, it's Sigma in this Theorycrafting. So what is a main tank? And there's a lot of definition. I've heard a lot of definitions. One definition that I heard was the main tank is the tank that controls the opposing team main group. That's of course, it's seemingly correct, as that statement is seemingly correct. I don't remember who told me that, but it makes sense and it sounds right until you watch Dive, especially certain playstyles in Dive, where the D.Va's job is to control the two tanks, and the Winston's job is to dive and isolate targets. And at that point, like, the D.Va is in theory the main tank, even though the Winston is the main tank. So my best definition of main tank in Overwatch, which I like, is that the main tank is the one that kind of forces or specifies the playstyle of the team. So if you play Dive, so if you play Winston, essentially, you have dive comp, and it's very specified that this is dive comp. And because the Winston will need to have follow-up on his engages, you can play dive a lot of ways. Dive doesn't mean leap, target, and kill it, idiots. Dive means just you have a very mobile team composition. You can play a dive comp that works on choking out areas and just allowing space for DPSs to make work, and then the dive just continuously pushes in and denies space, high grounds, angles, and so on, so that the enemy team has limited space, giving a lot of advantages and allows your DPS to play very aggressive. You can play a setup dive where you have, for example, two flankers that sets up and hits the backline, just immediately destroys it. You can play counter dive. You can play a lot of stuff with dive comp, But in the end, the Winston dictates the playstyle. You don't dictate the playstyle around the D.Va, you dictate the playstyle around the Winston. The fact that you don't really have a shield and the way that he has to engage, it's set up around that. You have to play these loose, you have to play in the dive area, have to set up so you can attack and fight in the dive area, and that the dive needs somewhere to happen. And that's how that's good. Same if you play Deathball, you have this very strict where there's a lot of people that's going to stay with the Rhine. The Rhine's going to push, hold areas, push that way, deny space that way, and you will push and support him so he can get pushed back and so he can play aggressively. And when he plays aggressively, you get a lot of stuff done. Same goes to Bunker. Bunker is a very slow pushing team composition that relies a lot on resources a lot of time, right? If you notice a lot of the team composition, it's a resource build. It's a very resource, like making sure the fortify is not popped too early and whatnot. You can quickly claim space, you have claiming, and then just hold that space. And then you claim more space, hold it, claim, hold, claim, hold, claim, hold the entire time, weakening the opposing team, or at least denying them, keeping them so low on the resources that they never can fully do a push, giving you, buying you time and allowing you to build ultimates and win fights. Sigma is not a main tank in a lot of situations, because Sigma doesn't really gives you any playstyle. The same like at Zarya. Like, yes, Zarya can allow you to play around the Zarya. If you only have a Zarya and you probably play a different rank, you can play Zarya Hog. And yes, you do have a playstyle. You have these two tanks, and you have the hooks, and you have the bubbles, and so, but they don't distinctively give you a playstyle, because the Zarya can't really make plays due to her not having shield. Like, she can't really say, okay, I will engage this tank, or I will push this area, because you will push into areas with no shield, getting you quickly punished by the enemy team main group. And the same is with Sigma. Yes, he does have a shield, but the shield is incredibly fragile. It has a very long recharge time. He's very easily, to a certain extent, zoned out. So while yes, he can put up barriers to block damage, and while yes, that can help, like the Earth shield went down, we put up our own Sigma barrier, this is it's not a playstyle. The reason that you do that is because the Orisa allows the playstyle. That's why he is categorized as an off-tank. But that's a very off-centered note. The whole idea is not that youroverwatch is saying, or whoever wrote the tweet, I don't actually know who wrote the tweet, since I think it's a public account for everybody that's on the youroverwatch, and there's like 3-4 people. So I don't know who exactly wrote the tweet, but what he meant was, it doesn't play like an official, like a traditional off-tank, and I agree, if anything, it plays a little bit like D.Va used to play in Dive and also in Deathball, with the fact that you have Matrix that could overlap, and that you have Matrix that could help at these resting points, or to disengage, or to engage with, which kind of work like a barrier, right? Like, the thing that you can do that is kind of similar to what you can do now with Sigma, but again, yes, I do agree, he's weird as an off-tank, and he kind of like leaps in this like limbo area in between. But let's look at the theory. The theory is that this team composition with a Ryan and a Winston will beat the Orisa Sigma comp. So when looking at this, the first thing I look at is, okay, So what do we have here to our disposal? We can kind of split this up in two ways. The reason that you don't play two main tanks normally is just because you don't want two different playstyles on the team, right? So here I balance it in two different ways. This is where you balance it around the Reinhardt. You give it the Reinhardt, 2 DPSs, that works well in the main group. In the death ball, so I give it enhanced or create, it doesn't really matter. And then I give it 2 supports. These supports have been stationed the same, and it's also the same with the enemy. So supports are just a support, right? Long range healing for the tanks, and speed boost to engage the Rein, and also speed boost is a lot of time used in dive. The problem here is, of course, that the Winston will leap into a main group, or drop into a main group, and he won't have the damage to actually kill anybody. And that's the issue. While, yes, there's a lot of pressure here, this guy won't be allowed to play. He will quickly be zoned out, draw a lot of healing, and even if it engages, he can't 1v1 people in the backline, as a pocketed DPS or even a pocket support can take out Winston very easily, or make it so low that it's very easy. And it's very easy for, and we are talking about this from a competitive play standpoint, not a ranked play, where you can, Winston can be in the backline of the enemy team for half an hour, and the enemy team will not notice because they don't pay attention to voice chat. This is from a team perspective. It doesn't take a long thing for this bunker here to quickly just send one guy back and just kill the Winston with whatever supports. And the Winston will very quickly not be able to do anything about it and have to disengage, and therefore he is useless. That's the problem there. Then there's this. This is where I split the DPSs over to the dive. So now I'll give them 2 flankers. Here's the problem with that. You set up these 2 flankers and they dive in, and while yes, these guys can do a lot of shit here, and yes, the support they can speed push the Genji in, so the Genji get rage, just like normal. This is normal double flanker dive. The only thing that we've done is we swapped the D.Va for a Rein, and the Rein cannot fill the role that the D.Va normally would, and the Rein won't be allowed to do it. He can push towards Orisa, but Orisa can quickly just remove his shield and health. And the Rein cannot beat the Orisa on a 1v1 if Orisa has Fortify. So here you meet that problem, that the Rein can't really do anything towards the bunker. And that's the issue here. So therefore, it's an unoptimal pick. You have, yes, the dive can work. The dive can, we killed Diana with the dive. We killed the Hanzo with the dive. Great. But if you just had a D.Va, this would just be more effective. As you could control the main group, you could stop the Orisa Sigma from doing anything. You could pressure them with the D.Va, blah, 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 blah. As D.Va works really well for that. So what I've done is I made this. So this is the team composition that I would assume. Because again, we're trying to make this work. And it's very easy, and I hate when this happens, and I'm trying never to do that on my channel, and I have done it in the past, and I try not to do it, where you just listen to a YouTuber or someone else's argument, doesn't really need to be a YouTuber, and you just say, nope, and you make an argument that counters their argument, and you stack all the favors in your advantage. I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying to make a theory where this team composition can work. Because while it's, it's not meta, and it's not something that we've done, like, really ever in Overwatch, we never really played 2 main tanks, I love these kind of Theorycrafting. And I think that's really great that whoever from your Overwatch, I think it's Frito, I'm not sure who actually tweeted this, because thinking outside the box like this is insanely helpful, it's really powerful, and it's super fun. So this is the team composition that I came up with. The Rein has a main. Again, this is purely built around this team composition. So the Rein has a main with him. On a Lucio still, you need long range shield, you need the engage on these guys, and the Monkey has a Doomfist. This way, the Monkey has enough damage. Like, if you played this with a Tracer, it would be very easy for them to zone out the Tracer during the setup. Like, she would try to flank down here, up here or up here, and she could very easily get low and forced to, go to health packs, and therefore never be really able to follow the Winston on the dive. Therefore, we have a Doomfist. On top of the fact, like, barriers and shit, and aim is into, he has just so much burst. The same with the Genji, limiting a 15-meter dash range as you're engaged, and limiting, even though, Monkey's 30 on the leap, on the melee as he hits the ground on the target, plus the 80 from, like, the minimum 80 that the Genji will get from a dash melee, while that plus Tesla Cannon quickly can, stack up towards 150 health in a pretty quick burst. Peeled by supports, the Monkey will die very quickly, and therefore the Genji doesn't work, right? So you can stack up most supports, like the TPSs, with the Monkey here, and it becomes very, very difficult. And the Monkey needs someone to follow him. Like, you can't play this with a Widow instead. Like, you can't say, oh, the Widow could just sting, because the Monkey, the only reason to play the Monkey is to be able to have an engage, and therefore you need someone to engage with him, so he can, for example, engage here. Behind statue, where these guys can't help. Or behind an enemy barrier, where, again, these guys can't help because there's a barrier in the way. Right? Which is a big problem for this. So, this is how I've been setting it up, quickly. In the main group, because the problem with the so now we kind of we have, quote-unquote, fixed the dive. right? By allowing the Winston to have that was a really shitty spelling and writing, but we allowed the Winston to have a DPS to follow him up. He now has a damage that he can kind of do his things and get the picks done and have someone with him that can deal a lot of pressure and can stay in the fight with him. That also has the engage range of the Winston. The Winston has an incredible leap range. Like the Winston can leap from like here to like here easily. The Numbers can do the same with his if he does a rollout with the rocket punch, even though that's a very expensive and very high risk engage. He can still do it if he needs to. He can do short setups with just a slam and uppercut and then disengage with a rocket punch, or he can do longer engages. He can also slam, uppercut, get a kill with the monkey on whoever was die target, and then rocket punch someone either away, like for example a tank or whatever, or rocket punch one-shot them, which allows 2 picks and allows, again, this kind of space around the monkey that the Doomfist can play around the bubble of the Winston. Then we have the Death Ball. And the problem with the Death Ball has been that the Ryan is super weak. Without his Zarya to bubble for him, without a main tank to guard him, allows very quick, easily push against the Ryan. The Ryan can't 1v1 the Orisa because Fortify is a thing. The Ryan has difficulty pushing even with the Lucio, because even though he managed to get to them, as soon as he drops the shield, he will take too much damage. And without being able to get bubble and then have a Zarya to then keep pressure on the shield or the enemy main group, so they can't just regain all the resources, and then he's allowed to go offensive and so on, it becomes very difficult. So I gave him a main. The main can wall for him either defensively, so block off between him and the enemy team if he needs to rest. It can block off an enemy frontliner to, for example, the Orisa, to force out Fortify of the Orisa. It can split the enemy team. It can split the enemy team so the dive team is allowed to work, and the Death Ball really just keeps the main group protected. But what I think that we will be seeing most in this strategy is a wall will come out to block off the opposing team's Orisa to force out Fortify, to weakening the main group. It also does that it's very difficult to push the Ryan, as if the tanks extend too far, you have a mate guarding you, it's very difficult. You can be some struggles with DPS. You do lack a lot of verticality, like for example if they take an angle here, but that's also where the dive team comes in. That, the dive team should be hopefully able to deny whatever DPS is tries to off angle in on the Death Ball main group. So hopefully that should not be a problem. Now let's put this into context. So the whole idea of this is let's say the Death Ball team. Let's say they want to push around statue, which is a really dumb idea against this team comp, but let's say that they want to do that. Like, they don't know what we are playing, right? So they have their team here, right? Right now they're playing double sniper. So they have just set up, they have the Widow top here, they have their hands-on statue here, right? The whole idea is that as the front line extends forward, the back line will hopefully be left behind. And as they extend into the range of the Ryan to brawl with him, Wall will come up splitting the Orisa or the Orisa and the Sigma. Orisa and the Sigma is even better, just because then you can pressure the Sigma and you will get double value of this. And then you can amp speed in your tanks. So as these guys extend, who will be staying behind? Yes, you can maybe have the Lucio with them, and yes, you can maybe, put the Widow in a more aggressive position or whatnot. And you can have the Hanzo in a very aggressive position. But in the end, they will split back. They will keep the distance from the main group because they want to keep the distance from the Rhine. As these guys extend in and kind of tries to block off whatever, let's say 1 or 2 of them, we force out Fortify. We don't need to fight them. We force out Fortify. The Rhine just needs to make sure that he doesn't die here or gets too low that he needs to run away. So running in, doing a couple of swings with the Mei, playing around the barrier, kind of ice spiking the Orisa, especially claiming the enemy is Orisa shield, so wait for the Orisa to pop a shield and then rush, wall, force out Fortify. Now you have this engage, and from then this happens. Then the engage happens between these two. For example, going straight for Diana and singling her out, right? Because there's no strong main group to protect this. And this is the whole setup. That is the whole setup of this dive team. That you wait until an extent. You can do this from multiple angles. Like, you can hold this, and in this scenario, it becomes very difficult. The Widow has very little space, for example. So the Widowmaker will have to play like this angle back here, where she's still diveable, but even if she isn't diveable, the supports are still diveable, right? The supports are still diveable, and in theory, you can also just say, okay, let's say that they don't play DPS that is diveable, you can instill seeking, okay, wall, fortifies out, great. Call to the dive tanks to the Fortify us out, and then dive the enemy main group. And they say, Fortify is not on the result, we have forced out that resource of her immediately with the wall, please help us dive her. The dive will then happen, the Monkey will go in here, split the main group. This is very common for normal dive as well against Bunker. You can do this in normal dive against Bunker. The Monkey will then come in, split off the main group, so split off the back line, which will be forced back by the Monkey Tesla Cannon, and the front line, the Doomfist can then choose with them Winston either to engage a squishy, right, that had been too far, that had been out of position, or put all their attention onto, for example, the Sigma. Or the Orisa. Even though with Fortify, a rush like this can do a lot, especially if nades comes out and whatnot, right? And the great thing about this is a lot of time that when we wall the Orisa or the tanks, what will the enemy do? They will rush forward. They will extend further in to almost out of position. Let's say that we hide up here, just to make it a little bit more fun or whatever. They will extend in to their position to try to peel for the tank, to try to keep pressure on the Rhine. The Rhine will just go past it with his shield. He needs to make sure that he has a shield, of course, doing this. And at that point, you have the dive. You can also push the dive team. No, not the dive team, sorry. You can also put the Death Ball team to rotate through Hotel. And let's say that our dive team is playing top here, for example, kind of hiding, whatever, like here, for example, right? You can hide them here, you rotate through Hotel, and when you rotate through Hotel, what will these guys do immediately, right? These guys will start taking their high grounds, these guys will start doing their rotations, and it's the same thing. You do your rotation, the dive team engages the back line or the sniper line, and the front line engages here. Walling top, for example, in this scenario, for example, popping walls on top, yes, that doesn't deny the Hanzo, but it does slow down the Widow. The engage happens on the front line, the back lines get taken out, and then as the front line, or as for example the back line is taken out, the front line is left on the low ground. The enemy, the Death Ball, will rotate around the Death Ball into a position where they can stay safe. You don't even need to rotate down theoretically. And then you have a fight where you can now just play very passive against the, where instance you can put as much pressure as you want there. The problem is a lot of things with this. This works really great on paper. Now here comes a bunch of problems. First of all, this is very easily countered by just picking a diva. I quickly built a team composition that works against this way too easy. The rush comp, which is the diva, the rush comp, which most of us already know. I don't think I have it stored here because it continuously deletes my stored stuff. Yeah, I have a clockwork comp. This is almost the same. I'll just swap out this for the Reaper and then we have it almost. The rush comp, for example, works practically, this works like flawlessly against the scene composition, which is very meta right now. And you might say that, oh, but again, this wasn't the Theorycrafting. The Theorycrafting was against the 2 double shield, and I'll show how the double shield should counter this very easily. But let's just see. This team composition will immediately deny. I'll swap this for a diva, and then we have the rush comp. Sorry, I didn't see that. There. Now we counter this entire team composition. We can just push the point. Wherever the monkey sets up, the diva can counter it. Wherever the monkey dies, the diva will counter it immediately. With the Reaper or without the Reaper, doesn't matter. The Reaper can push the Rhine. Rhine, your May can't do shit because we also have a May. We have walls, we have Fortify, we have better resources. And while you can try to wall and force out the Fortify and also force out our wall, and maybe you can ding the Reaper hard enough, and if he extends past our shield to force out his Ray Form, and now there's very little resources, and now there's some dive targets, like the Reaper, for example, or the Orisa, or whatnot. None of these can really do anything. The Monkey cannot dive any of these 2 tanks. The Diva can deal with the Rhine and the Monkey. The Doomfist as well will have very little effect. Most of these are very difficult to get to. Most of these hard counter the enemy team. This comp immediately just destroys. Just rush and play the objective. And there's nothing the dive team can do without it. The Rhine cannot engage even remotely against the team composition without getting shredded immediately. And the dive team cannot engage without getting shredded immediately. And we only need 1 or 2. We only need these 3 alone can stop the dive, the Death Ball, from doing anything. And this one alone can stop the dive. Can stop the dive team from doing anything effectively. And as soon as it happens in competitive games, you will alternate between the Reaper might help the Diva deal with the Monkey Doomfist. The may help, right? All these will of course help. As soon as the Death Ball has been low on health and is falling back, if the dive team at that point engages, they will just turn all their figures except the Orisa over to the dive team and just shred the dive team. And the dive team will have to burn all their abilities to get back out if they haven't burned it on the engage, or die. And then they will just say, okay, the dive team disengages, let's focus on destroying the Death Ball. At that point, you have split your team in a group of 4 and a group of 2, and they cannot synergize between each other, which was the whole point of this. Now, you said that, well, again, the whole theory is not to change the team composition. The tanks. Let's swap the DPSs to a better team composition. Let's keep the Widow. Let's let's, for example, play this a little bit slower. Let's add the Mercy. Let's add the Pharaoh. And all of a sudden, the team composition changes drastically. The Pharaoh alone can keep the Death Ball at bay with the Orisa. We swap this guy for a Kree, or a May, or a Reaper, or even a Sombra at that point, or the Widow. The Widow can also play Guardian Angel, or you can play this for a Kree or something, or a Hanzo, just to get LOS. And all of a sudden you see how this becomes a problem. The problem is, with this team composition, is that you have two very different playstyles. And the enemy team can very hard counter one of the playstyles, meaning you deny half. Very sorry about that. That's some Discord stuff, so I'm gonna just turn myself invisible. You can very easily deny or block off or split off teams very easily. For example, here the Pharmacy can both zone high grounds, the dive team, making sure the Monkey is always low or the Doomfist is always low. And the Pharaoh can also make sure that the Rhine is always consistently pressured, and if he tries to engage the Orisa, who can set up on the point with distance, with the... why does this continue pinging me, if that's a thing? Sorry about that. I thought I blocked that. But if these two alone can stop the Death Ball from really doing a lot. Like, they can still push in a wall and whatnot and force some abilities, but with the Pharaoh, it becomes almost impossible, and including the fact that the dive team also can get zoned by the Pharaoh, and you have line of sight from the Widow, or whatever DPS you have here can also play either further back, or play high grounds and get LOS on the dive team, or help just immediately pressure, like hard pressure the enemy team. For example, with a Mei. If you have a Mei, most of these engages become useless all of a sudden, right? That's one of the issues. The other issue, and let's just say that you don't play the Pharmacy because it's kind of menacing, and you have to play Lucio, and you have to play blah, 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 right? Let's say that you have to do that. The way that you counter this is the same way that we have countered dive on King's Row for years. And while I'm adding the team composition, and while I'm finding the other one, how do we counter dive a lot of time on this? What has been like the main thing? Let's add a Kree here for fun. Instead of the Hanzo. How did we counter that beforehand? And if you said you rotate through Hotel, then you have played scrims enough in EU that you have heard the call, okay, they play dive, so rotate through Hotel, guys, and take the point. You heard that call a billion times, and that's what would happen here. You would rotate through Hotel, the enemy would be forced to rotate here, and now you have set up here. The Rhine can try to hold close, and you can try to wall, but the Rhine will be very quickly low. And if you can notice where the next resting point for the Rhine is, it's here. That's a long resting point. This is a very long disengage. The wall can come out passively, but then you have no wall to contest the contest on the objective. And the Orisa will not be forced to play out Fortify, and even if it will, she can just rush in on the Rhine, like aggressively bubble the Rhine if he tries to hold the corner, Fortify in on him, and try to just deal with that. There are two doors, so it's very difficult to block, and even though, yes, you can block the Orisa for a while, the off angles will start coming in, and the Orisa's Fortify will keep her alive for enough, and you have need, if anything needed, and the speed will come in. Then you have another DPS, either from another angle, or in the same angle. For example, you can play this with a Reaper, and just say, like, here's a Reaper, there you go, right? You can also play this with a Mei, and be really nasty. I just played it with a Kree, just for fun. And you see how, fundamentally, this starts to struggle now. Yeah, you can set up the dive team now, top here as well, and say, okay, yeah, but we will set them up on top. But the rotation will force the enemy team in such a bad position, because this position worked really well when the Rhine could play Hotel side and could use the wall that's close to the objective to push in and chase them off the objective. And then the dive came in. Worked really great. Notice the engage range now. The next resting point is here, which is also exposed to Hotel. Or you play Statue, which again give you too long engage line, like too long LOS. And, okay, what is the dive team going to do about that? Like, this team doesn't need to move. Or you try to fight them, and you can't fight them yet, because the dive team hasn't properly set up, and before, we have drained this from resource, like, for example, before we had drained out the Fortify of the opposing team, which was one of the cues for this, or before the main group extends so far forward that the dive team can make a lot of chaos happen, right? Before any of that would happen, the Death Ball would already have lost Either they would die, or they would be so low on resources that they would not be able, they would have to disengage very far back, doing that these two would again attack 2v6. And this team doesn't have to expend that many resources doing it. That is the core issue that I found. So does this work in theory? In theory, yes. Especially against teams that play this very linear style, where you run around here, or even you run around in here, and as you have extended too far, you dive, and then you push in with the main group. Works really great. And it shows a really well principle that especially in a lot of tier Overwatch, for example in GM games, you don't need insane team composition. You don't need to play the 2-2 rush comp. This comp, which has been stamped as the most unmeta shit ever in the history of ever, is, really work really well. And it's a really fun concept. And I want to give props for Overwatch, because if he hadn't posted that and even said, I think that this works, and made me think about it, I would never even have thought that this would even be a possibility. And you can see how this works really well. Small units fighting together. The problem is, and this has been a very large talking point for Overwatch, is that the reason we pick a main tank is to force one play style. Not dive, death ball, bunker. They all have one seemingly very favorable advantages and some disadvantages. This has two different play styles. One that's a play together as a unit, play around the Rhine. Another one that's set up a dive. Go in, distract, let the DPS do their work. And these are two very different fundamentally teams that has problem synergizing with each other. Because the Rhine will be fighting low ground, because the Rhine needs his time to go in, and because the way that the Rhine fights is very dependent on having somebody that protects him, so he can be offensive with bubbles, with matrix, with stuns, with armor packs, with a lot of healing like nades and so on, so he can continue using his hammer. Because if he gets too low, he's AFKing with his shield in the middle of a point, not dealing damage. And if you watch Goat's meta, this is why Goats were a snowball comp. Because if you were winning the HP fight heavily against the Reinhardt, or the resource management, like say the enemy team bubbled too early, and you didn't, you could force the enemy Ryan very low. That would significantly throttle the enemy's DPS output, which allowed you to play more aggressive, which forced the healers to try to pocket more, meaning that your tanks could not off-angle, throttling your DPS output even more, meaning you could play more aggressive because the enemy tanks would not off-angle against yours, right? And this would allow a very quick snowball in fights, where if you got a little bit of an advantage resource-wise, you could very quickly snowball, because the amount of damage would do. And this is exactly the same. You try to engage, you will quickly get burned, even with walls, if they play a team composition that has such a strong main group. And while the logic of the team is really cool, because it's like, okay, let's make sure that the Orisa and the Sigma, they have two barriers. Let's just make the barriers useless. Let's just push in with two tanks. And this team is built very much around that. You have a Mei that can go in and brawl. You could play Destroy Reaper, but that would lose a lot of the engagement on the Rhine. You have a Mei, and you have a Doomfist that can also just ignore barriers. You have nades, you have speeds, you can really get close. But the enemy team has just so much sustain in resources. Fortify just stops a lot of this. The Sigma can do a lot of damage. He can also stun. The Kree has a flashbang and a lot of damage. You have speed boost to move and peel. You have push to peel. You have sleep dots, which can work, especially on the monkey. You have nades, which gives you a lot of sustain. And you have the fact that the Kree can also off-angle and do a lot of poke damage initially. All of this, and this goes for whatever DPS you really swap out here. Unless you put like really bad DPSs in this, like Soldier Widow, for example, would work really, really, really bad against this, right? At that point, sure, this would work really great, because then there wouldn't really be any DPSs here, and then you could force out Fortify and rush. But as soon as they start playing competent DPSs and they start rotating to take advantage from you, and this could probably work on some maps and so on, this becomes an issue. I hope that you guys like this kind. This is a really long video. I don't know how long I've been talking. I've been talking for 35 minutes. Holy shit. Thank you again to youroverwatch for the amazing idea. I think this is really good. Very underrated when it comes to... for someone that has been coaching tier 2 and tier 3, and is a very critical of what content I like and watch on YouTube, the channel, youroverwatch, in my opinion, is very underrated and gets a lot of hate for no real reason outside of the fact that they are bigger than a lot of people, like bigger than a lot of channels. I don't know why they get a lot of hate. Maybe it's because they're one of the biggest in the YouTube market, and that's just like what comes with, you know, what comes with the job title. Very underrated. And yeah, if you like this kind of video, press a like if you want to see more stuff like this. I assume that most people wouldn't make it to the end, but if you did, tell me down in the comments, and I'll like your comment. Anyway, guys, please take care of yourselves, stay positive. I love you guys very much, as always. My name has been Jonal, and if you want to hire me as a private coach, it's 50 euros for a 2-hour session. Hit me up on our Discord server, which I link down below. But as always, take care of yourself, stay positive, and keep the enemy in your closet.